AITA for exposing my sister's forged inheritance claim after she said I never owned the house? I'm Alyssa, 39, the younger daughter in a family where keeping the peace usually meant everyone kept quiet while my older sister got her way. I was the one people called cold because I didn't hug someone 5 minutes after they insulted me, and Brooke was the one everyone called responsible because she could say the right thing in front of the right people. After our parents died within weeks of each other, I was still finding hospice receipts in my purse, old gas station coffee cups in my car, and Mom's handwriting on scraps of paper I wasn't ready to throw away. That was why what happened at the first family dinner after the funeral didn't feel like a simple fight over money. It felt like someone was trying to erase the last year of my parents' lives and write me out of it. Brooke is 4 years older than me. Growing up, she was the organized one. Her homework was color-coded. She remembered birthdays. She knew how to carry 3 plates to the table without being asked, and how to smile when an adult was watching. I was more direct. If something hurt, I said it hurt. If an apology sounded fake, I didn't pretend it fixed anything. That made me too sensitive, hard to read, and eventually difficult. Brooke didn't have to be cruel loudly. She only had to look disappointed. If I objected to her borrowing my clothes without asking, she would sigh and say, "I thought sisters shared." If she volunteered both of us for some family chore, then disappeared halfway through it, she would come back when the adults were looking and ask whether I needed help finishing. In family pictures, she stood in the center because she had pulled everyone together. If I didn't smile after an argument, Mom would lean toward me and whisper, "Please don't ruin this for everybody." By adulthood, the pattern had become so normal that even I stopped noticing it sometimes. When our parents needed a new water heater, I found the contractor, met him at the house, and paid the deposit. Brooke posted a picture online of Dad standing beside the finished installation with the caption, "Taking care of the people who took care of us." When Mom started missing medical appointments, I rearranged my week, drove her, took notes, and called the pharmacy afterward. Brooke would arrive on Sunday with flowers, stay for 40 minutes, and tell relatives she was coordinating Mom's care. At Thanksgiving one year, Aunt Lorraine praised Brooke for handling everything. Brooke smiled and said, "Alyssa helped too in her own way." She said it like I had brought napkins once. Our younger brother Julian usually stayed out of it. He is 7 years younger than Brooke and 3 years younger than me, and he learned early that the easiest place in our family was the doorway. He could step halfway into a problem, announce that both sides were upset, then disappear before anybody asked him to do anything uncomfortable. He wasn't cruel. He was just practiced at avoiding the person most likely to make a scene. That person was never me. About a year before Dad died, his health declined quickly. Mom was already struggling with her own medical issues, but she kept insisting they were fine. They weren't. There were medication schedules taped inside a kitchen cabinet, home care visits written on the wall calendar, and oxygen tubing coiled beside Dad's recliner. The house always smelled faintly like coffee, hand lotion, and the plastic from medical equipment. First, we split things loosely. I took weekday appointments because Brooke said weekends were easier for her. Then Brooke began canceling weekends because she and Daniel had plans, or because she was exhausted, or because traffic was bad. Julian offered to help whenever needed, but he needed at least 5 days' notice and usually asked whether someone else could cover first. So I covered. I filled out hospice paperwork at the dining table while Dad slept in the next room. I picked up prescriptions after dark. I learned which home care aide could calm Mom down when she became confused, and which equipment company charged a rental fee, even when the machine sat unused. I also started paying bills. My parents had fallen behind on the mortgage after medical costs increased. Dad was embarrassed, so he pushed the statement into a drawer and told me it was handled. It wasn't. I set up automatic payments from my account for several months and told him we could call it a loan if that made him feel better. I paid the property tax installment when the deadline notice arrived. I covered hospice copays, a hospital bed rental, and a stair rail Mom kept insisting they did not need. I did not announce any of it to the family. Part of that was pride. Part of it was exhaustion. Mostly, I knew that if Dad realized how much help they needed, he would feel humiliated. I wanted him to keep whatever dignity he could. Brooke knew. She saw the mortgage confirmation on the kitchen counter once and asked why my name was on it. "Because it came from my account," I said. She stared at me for a second, then folded the paper and put it face down. "You should be careful," she said. "People could think you're trying to create a claim against the estate." I remember looking at her and thinking it was a strange thing to say while our father was still alive. "I'm trying to keep the bank from taking their house. I'm just saying. Money makes people ugly." That was Brooke's favorite trick. She warned you about the things she was already doing. Her public version of that year looked very different. She posted old photos of herself with our parents and wrote long captions about cherishing every moment. She checked in from the hospital lobby even on days when I had taken Dad to the appointment and she had stopped by for 15 minutes. Relatives responded with hearts and comments about what a devoted daughter she was. I stopped reading them. One night, after Dad had a bad fall, Brooke arrived while the paramedics were still there. I had been at the house since early afternoon. My sweatshirt had dried coffee on the sleeve, and I had one of Dad's socks in my pocket because I had grabbed it off the floor without thinking. Brooke walked in wearing a clean coat, looked around and asked, "Why wasn't I called sooner?" Mom was sitting at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. "I called you twice," I said. Brooke checked her phone and frowned. "I was in a meeting." "You said you were at dinner." She gave me that disappointed look. "This isn't the time." Later, when Dad was settled, Mom found me rinsing a glass at the sink. "Don't fight her while your father can still hear it," she whispered. I turned off the faucet. "I'm not trying to fight her." "I know." Mom glanced toward the hallway before she continued. "She's moving things around." "What things?" "Accounts. Papers. I don't know all of it." That got my attention. Mom had always protected Brooke, sometimes at everyone else's expense. Hearing fear in her voice was different. I asked whether Brooke had taken money. Mom pressed her lips together. "Your father can't take another upset." "Then let me call Mr. Harris." "Not yet." Mr. Harris had handled my parents' wills and a few other matters over the years. He was calm, exact, and almost impossible to rush. Brooke disliked him because he answered the question that had been asked, not the one she wanted him to answer. Mom gripped my wrist. "Promise me you won't start a war while your father is alive." I hated the request, but Dad had just come home from the hospital. He was frightened, weak, and still trying to apologize for needing help to stand. So I promised. That promise became the reason I stayed quiet much longer than I should have. Over the next 2 months, I noticed things that didn't add up. A property tax statement disappeared from the mail pile, and Brooke said it had never arrived. I later found the overdue notice behind a stack of grocery flyers. There were withdrawals from my parents' checking account in round amounts. $1,500, $2,000, $1,800. When I asked Mom, she said Brooke had told her they were for house expenses. The house did not have new repairs, new furniture, or anything else that explained them. I saw a certified mail receipt addressed to Mr. Harris's office tucked under Mom's checkbook. When I asked about it, Mom said, "He has what he needs." Then she changed the subject. Brooke became more interested in paperwork. She asked where Dad kept the deed. She wanted the password for the utility accounts. She told Julian she was taking over the administrative side because I was too emotional. I was not emotional in front of Brooke. That was probably what bothered her. Dad died first. The last 3 days were a blur of low voices, medication alarms, and people opening the refrigerator without taking anything out. I stayed overnight twice. Brooke came during the day, usually when relatives were visiting. On the final morning, I was sitting beside Dad's bed when his breathing changed. Mom stood on the other side, rubbing his forearm. Brooke arrived 20 minutes later and cried into Mom's shoulder, while Aunt Lorraine told everyone how strong she had been. I did not correct anybody. The week after Dad's funeral, Mom's condition worsened. Grief seemed to pull the structure out of her. She stopped eating much. She became confused about what day it was, and then suddenly clear about details nobody else knew. One afternoon, she asked me to drive her to the bank. I told her I could handle whatever she needed, but she insisted. We never made it inside. She sat in the passenger seat for almost 10 minutes, looking at the glass doors, then asked me to drive home. When we reached the house, she put her hand on mine before I could turn off the car. "There's an envelope under your spare tire." I looked at her. "What envelope?" "For Harris." Don't open it unless he tells you to. After my funeral. Mom. Listen to me. Her voice sharpened in a way I had not heard in months. Brooke heard me say there was a copy. She'll look in the house. She won't look in your car because she thinks you're careless. Under other circumstances I might have laughed. Instead I felt cold. What did she do? Mom stared through the windshield. She used your father's name. For what? I don't know everything. Harris does. I wanted to push harder. I wanted to call him from the driveway. But Mom was trembling, and she was still protecting Dad even after he was gone. Then she said, I left you a message to save it. That night, I found the envelope beneath the spare tire in the trunk. It was thick, cream-colored, and sealed across the back with Mom's initials written over the flap in shaky blue ink. I left it sealed. The voicemail came the next morning, while I was asleep after another overnight shift. It was 19 seconds long and saved on my phone under Mom Do Not Delete. I listened once, sitting on the edge of my bed, and then I could not make myself play it again. Mom died 17 days after Dad. At her funeral, Brooke performed grief perfectly. I do not mean that her grief was fake. I believe she loved our parents. That was part of what made everything harder. People can love someone and still exploit them. They can cry at a funeral and still have taken money from the person in the casket. Brooke greeted guests, adjusted flower arrangements, answered questions about the reception, and accepted every compliment about how much she had done. I had paid the funeral home deposit 3 days earlier because Brooke said the estate account was temporarily tied up. I had the invoice in my purse showing the deposit, balance, and payer. During the reception, Aunt Lorraine touched Brooke's arm and said, Your sister has carried this family. Brooke lowered her eyes modestly. I just did what had to be done. I was standing 6 feet away holding a paper cup of coffee. Julian saw my face and murmured, Not today. I said, I didn't say anything. Your face did. That was the family rule in one sentence. Brooke could tell a lie out loud, but my face reacting to it was what threatened the peace. 2 days after the funeral, I went to my parents' house for Mom's jewelry box and a stack of handwritten recipe cards she had promised me. My key did not work. I tried it twice before noticing the new silver lock on the front door. The spare key was gone from its usual place in the garage. Brooke answered after my third call. Did you change the locks? For safety. Safety from whom? There was a pause. You don't have to make everything adversarial. I am standing outside our parents' house with a key that no longer works. I'm organizing things before probate gets messy. You were not appointed to organize anything. I'm the oldest, Alyssa. Someone has to act like an adult. She arrived 20 minutes later with Daniel. He stayed near the driveway while she unlocked the door. Inside, the living room looked almost the same but not quite. The framed family photos had been rearranged. A large picture of Brooke with Mom and Dad at an anniversary dinner sat on the mantel where an older photo of all 3 siblings had been. The hallway closet was empty. My boxes were in there, I said. I moved them. Where? Storage. Whose storage? Mine for now. Those boxes held school papers, photographs, a chipped ceramic horse I had made at 10, and letters from my grandmother. None of it was valuable, but every box was labeled in Mom's handwriting. You had no right. Brooke folded her arms. I'm trying to prevent chaos. Then put everything back. That is not practical. I looked toward Daniel. He avoided my eyes. The recipe cards were gone too. Brooke said she had not seen them. Before I left, I noticed a locksmith receipt on the kitchen counter. The date was the morning after Mom died. The next day, our parents' neighbor called me. She had seen Brooke at the house with a locksmith and 2 men loading boxes into an SUV. Her doorbell camera had caught part of it. She asked whether everything was all right. I said, not exactly. She sent me the clip and wrote a short statement describing what she had seen. I saved both. Then Brooke invited everyone to dinner. Her text said, We need to make decisions as a family before probate gets messy. Please come prepared to be reasonable. The dinner was at our parents' house, which told me everything I needed to know. When I arrived, there was a casserole dish warming in the oven, paper plates stacked by the stove, and a pitcher of iced tea sweating on the kitchen island. Nobody seemed hungry. Aunt Lorraine stood at the sink rinsing a serving spoon that was already clean. Two cousins whispered near the refrigerator. Julian stared at his phone. Daniel sat at the far end of the dining table, shoulders tight. Brooke sat at the head. In front of her was a neat stack of estate papers, a pen, and the locksmith receipt I had seen before. She had circled the words security service, as though that made the lock change official. She waited until everyone was seated. "I know this is painful," she began, "but Mom and Dad would not want us fighting over objects." I almost admired the efficiency. She had removed my belongings and opened the meeting by warning me not to fight over belongings. Brooke talked for several minutes about protecting the house, handling utilities, and preventing random access. Then she reached beside her chair and slid a sheet of paper across the table toward me. It was a storage unit notice. The account was in Brooke's name. The due date was 10 days away. A late fee of $45 would be added after that. She tapped the page. "Take your boxes before I toss them. This house was never yours." The room went still. I looked at the notice, then at her. Mom's casserole bubbled faintly in the kitchen. Brooke leaned back as if she had just made a reasonable administrative request. Aunt Lorraine cleared her throat. "You should be grateful your sister is even giving you time to collect your things." I turned to her. "My things were inside this house until Brooke removed them. Your parents are barely buried." That did not stop her from hiring a locksmith the next morning. Brooke's expression tightened. "I changed the locks because people had keys." "I am people? You know what I mean." "No. Say it." Julian put down his phone. "Can we not do this right now?" Brooke looked relieved to have him step in. "She only shows up when there is something to claim," she said. "I handled the hard parts. I handled Mom. I handled Dad. Alyssa stayed distant, and now she wants access to the house because she thinks she is owed something." One cousin looked down at her plate. Another watched me like she expected me to explode. I felt the first hot rush of anger rise into my throat. I could have emptied my purse onto the table right then. I had hospice receipts, the funeral invoice, and 2 mortgage confirmations with me by accident, because I had not cleaned out my bag. But Mom had not hidden that envelope, so I could throw documents around during a casserole dinner. Brooke believed my silence meant I had nothing. I wanted her to keep believing that for 3 more days. So I picked up the storage notice, folded it once, then again, and placed it in my purse. "You can call me difficult," I said. "You don't get to call me absent." Brooke gave a small sad smile for the room. "This is exactly what I mean. Everything becomes an attack." I looked at her stack of papers. "Say all of this again when Mr. Harris is here." Her smile flickered. "He doesn't need to be involved in personal belongings. He needs to be involved in the house. I already took care of the paperwork." "What paperwork?" Brooke's eyes moved toward the kitchen, then back to me. "The necessary paperwork." I stood. "This dinner is over for me," Aunt Lorraine said. "Family doesn't air this out in front of everyone." I put my purse over my shoulder. "I didn't invite an audience. Brooke did." That night I cleared my kitchen table. I laid out the mortgage statements showing automatic payments from my account. I printed the property tax confirmation with the date and transaction number. I arranged the hospice receipts by month and clipped them together with a black binder clip. I found the home care schedule. My name appeared on 11 overnight shifts and most weekday appointments. Brooke's name appeared 4 times. 2 of those entries had canceled written beside them. I printed the funeral invoice. The deposit line showed my card. The remaining balance showed a payment from the estate after I had covered the first amount. I added the email from Mr. Harris's office. It had arrived the morning after Mom died and said only, "Please retain any sealed materials provided by either parent. Supplemental instructions exist and will be reviewed at the estate conference." Then I retrieved the envelope from the trunk. For a long time I sat at the table with my hand on it. I hated that I had to prove I loved my parents. I hated that receipts mattered because memories did not count as evidence. I hated that I had kept silent to protect Dad, and had accidentally created the empty space Brooke needed to tell everyone I was not there. But I did not open the envelope. I called Mr. Harris the next morning. When I told him what Mom had given me, he was quiet for a few seconds. Is the seal intact? Yes. Do not open it. Bring it Thursday. I described the changed locks and the removed boxes. Was Brooke appointed personal representative by the court? Not that I know of. She was not. His tone did not change, but each word became more precise. Do you have proof of when she entered? I told him about the locksmith receipt, the neighbor's statement, and the doorbell clip. Bring those as well. That afternoon Julian called. He did not ask how I was doing. He said, "You need to stop making Brooke look bad." I was standing at the kitchen counter staring at Mom's recipe tin, the empty one she had kept spare coupons in. For 1 second I could almost smell her hand cream. I am not making Brooke look like anything. She says you threatened her with the attorney. I told her to repeat her claims in front of him. Same thing. No, Julian. It isn't. He exhaled loudly. Brooke's been dealing with a lot. So have I. I just think you're making everyone tense. That sentence finally broke something open in me, not loudly but permanently. You did not come for Dad's overnight shifts, I said. You did not fill out Mom's hospice forms. You did not ask who paid the mortgage. You chose the easiest version because it required nothing from you. That's not fair. It is exact. He went quiet. Then he said, "Can't you just get your boxes and let the estate process happen? You're asking me to protect the person accusing me. I'm asking you not to destroy the family." The family was not being protected. It was being managed. He ended the call soon after that. Thursday's meeting took place at our parents' dining table because Brooke insisted moving it to Mr. Harris's office would be too formal. Mr. Harris agreed only after making clear that the location did not give Brooke authority over the meeting. She still sat at the head of the table. The casserole dish was gone, but the paper plates from dinner remained in an open package on the counter. The iced tea pitcher had been washed and turned upside down beside the sink. Mr. Harris sat to Brooke's right with his leather briefcase on the floor. He had his own copies of the will, account records, certified mail, and correspondence from my parents. I sat opposite Brooke. Julian came in last and chose a chair near the wall. Aunt Lorraine sat beside him. Daniel stayed close to Brooke but looked as though he had not slept. Several relatives had returned because Brooke had told them the meeting would settle the misunderstanding. I suspected she wanted witnesses for my defeat. Mr. Harris began by explaining that probate had been opened, no final distribution had occurred, and no beneficiary had authority to remove or dispose of property, simply because they expected to inherit it. Brooke interrupted before he finished. I understand the technical language. I'm just trying to keep things simple. I recommend allowing me to finish, he said. She pressed her lips together. He continued. The house and its contents remained estate property. Access would be controlled during the probate process. An accounting would be required. Personal property would not be distributed until inventory was complete. Brooke tapped her pen. Alyssa's childhood items are not estate assets. I put them in storage so she could collect them. After changing the locks, I said. For safety. Mr. Harris looked at her. Did you receive court authorization to change the locks? I was protecting the residence. That was not my question. Daniel shifted in his chair. Brooke turned toward me instead. This is what she does. She takes normal decisions and turns them into accusations. Aunt Lorraine nodded. Your parents would be ashamed to hear this fighting. I let the silence sit. Mr. Harris asked Brooke to provide every key to the property by the end of the meeting. She laughed once softly. Are we really doing this because Alyssa is upset about old boxes? Then she pulled the storage notice from her stack. It was a copy of the one she had given me. She placed it in front of me. This is the last time I'm asking nicely. I reached into my purse. First, I placed the folded original notice beside her copy. Then I set Mom's sealed envelope next to it. The change in Brooke's face was small but immediate. Her eyes moved to Mom's initials across the flap. Her shoulders went rigid. One hand slipped from the table to her lap. Mr. Harris looked at me. Where did you obtain this? Mom put it under the spare tire in my car. She told me to give it to you after the funeral. Brooke spoke too quickly. Mom was confused near the end. Mr. Harris did not look at her. Has this been opened? No. He examined the front and back, compared Mom's signature to a document in his case, and then looked around the table. I am going to open the envelope and read the notarized instruction as written. Brooke pushed back her chair an inch. I don't think private notes should be read in front of extended family. I looked at her. You invited them. No one spoke. Mr. Harris opened the envelope carefully with a letter opener. Inside were 6 pages, a notarized letter, copies of bank records, a photocopy of a document bearing Dad's signature, and a handwritten note from Mom. Mr. Harris read the notarized letter first. My parents stated that I had provided substantial financial and caregiving support during the final year of their lives. The letter listed the mortgage, property taxes, hospice costs, transportation, and household expenses. It stated that Brooke had repeatedly misrepresented my involvement to relatives. Aunt Lorraine's face changed at that line. She stopped sitting upright and looked down at her hands. Mr. Harris continued. The letter directed that Brooke was not to control the residence, remove personal property, or manage estate accounts without independent review. During probate, authority over routine house access and preservation of property was to be assigned to me under Mr. Harris's supervision, subject to court approval. Brooke interrupted. That is ridiculous. Alyssa pressured Mom. Mr. Harris lifted one hand. The instruction was signed before a notary. I also met privately with both of your parents regarding the same concerns. Brooke stared at him. You met with Dad? Yes. When? That correspondence is in the attorney record. He turned to the next page. The letter requested an estate accounting and review of several transactions from my parents' accounts. It referred to transfers that did not appear connected to their care or the maintenance of the house. Then Mr. Harris reached the photocopied document. His voice became even flatter. This appears to grant Brooke expanded authority over certain financial and property matters. Your mother disputed its validity. Your father's signature on this copy differs materially from the verified signatures in my file. Brooke's face drained. Mr. Harris continued. Your parents requested that any document relying on this signature be reported through the proper probate and financial channels for review as a possible forgery. The word settled over the table. Forged. Nobody moved. Daniel looked at Brooke slowly. Did you know about this? Brooke turned to him. It's not what it sounds like. Then what is it? Dad signed things. He forgot. Mr. Harris said, the date on this document falls during a period when your father's medical records indicate severe weakness in his dominant hand. That does not decide the issue, but it is one reason the signature requires review. Brooke looked around the table, searching for the person who would rescue her. Aunt Lorraine stared at the table. Julian's mouth was slightly open. Brooke pointed at me. She has been planning this. She wants the house. I did not raise my voice. You knew I paid the mortgage. That doesn't mean you own anything. I didn't say it did. You're making grief about money. No. I'm correcting the lie you used to hide where the money went. Brooke's eyes flashed. I used money for Mom and Dad. Then the accounting will show that. Daniel asked again. Did you know about the signature? Brooke did not answer. I took out my phone. There's one more thing. Brooke's head snapped toward me. I opened the voicemail saved under Mom Do Not Delete. My thumb hovered over the screen for a second. I had not played it since the morning after Mom left it. Then I pressed play. Mom's voice filled the room, thin but unmistakable. Alyssa, save this. If Brooke says you abandoned us, don't believe her. She knows what she did with the account and she knows what you paid. Give Harris the envelope. The message ended. 19 seconds. That was all. Aunt Lorraine covered her mouth. Julian looked at me then away. Daniel pushed his chair back. Brooke, answer the question. Brooke's control finally cracked. She stood so fast her chair struck the wall. Mom was confused. Alyssa filled her head with this. She was always jealous of me, and now she's using our dead mother's voice to humiliate me. I stayed seated. You humiliated me in this room. You called me absent in front of everyone because you thought the people who could contradict you were dead. You want everyone to hate me. No. I want the record to be accurate. You have always wanted what I had. What did you have, Brooke? Their bank login? The keys? A document with Dad's name on it. Daniel stood too. I need to see our accounts. Brooke turned toward him. Do not do this here. You brought me here. He walked out of the dining room and into the front hall. A few seconds later, the door opened and closed. Brooke stared after him. I placed the mortgage statements on the table, followed by the property tax confirmation, hospice receipts, home care schedule, and funeral invoice. I did not explain every line. I did not need to. Mr. Harris reviewed enough to verify the names, dates, and payment sources. He compared several entries to records already in his file. Then I placed the neighbor's statement and a still image from the doorbell clip beside the locksmith receipt. The image showed Brooke at the front door the morning after Mom died, speaking to the locksmith while two men waited near her SUV. Mr. Harris looked at the date. Before any appointment and before any authorization, he said. Brooke sat back down, but the chair was no longer at the head of anything. It was just a chair. I looked at her. You didn't just try to take the house. You tried to erase the only person who knew how you were doing it. She shook her head. You're twisting everything. Then untwist it with documents. She had no answer. Mr. Harris closed the will and placed both hands on the table. All communication about the estate will go through my office effective immediately. Brooke started to object. He continued over her. Distribution to Brooke is paused pending estate accounting and review of the questioned transactions. No final determination is being made today regarding intent or liability. Records will be requested from the bank, the mortgage servicer, and any institution that received a document bearing your father's disputed signature. Brooke's breathing became shallow. Can you do that? I am required to protect the estate and follow your parents' instructions. He looked toward me. Subject to the probate court's approval, Alyssa will coordinate access to the residence for inventory and preservation. She will not have unilateral distribution authority. She will have operational access under written procedures. Then he looked around the room. No one enters the house or storage unit without written authorization. No property is removed, discarded, transferred, or sold. All keys are to be surrendered today. Brooke crossed her arms. I don't have all of them with me. Mr. Harris pulled a yellow legal pad closer. List every person who has one. She did not move. He waited. That was the difference between him and our family. He was comfortable letting silence become pressure. Eventually, Brooke wrote down 3 names. Mr. Harris also required her to provide the storage agreement, an inventory of everything removed, and access to the unit within 48 hours. Aunt Lorraine finally spoke. Her voice was much smaller than it had been at dinner. I didn't know. I looked at her. You didn't ask. She flinched. I believed Brooke. You corrected me publicly based on her story. Aunt Lorraine nodded once. I did. I'm not discussing forgiveness today. She looked as though she wanted to say family should move past things, but the voicemail had taken the authority out of that speech. Julian stood by the wall for most of the meeting. When Mr. Harris finished, he came toward me. I'm sorry, he said. I put the documents back into my purse. For what part? He swallowed. For believing her. For not helping. For repeating what she said. That is 3 different apologies. I know. Then they will take more than one sentence. He nodded. To his credit, he did not ask me to make him feel better. Brooke remained at the table while everyone else moved toward the kitchen or the door. As I passed her, she said, You are destroying this family over money. I stopped. No, Brooke. You gambled on my silence. I just stopped paying for it. The immediate consequences were not dramatic in the way people imagine consequences. No police arrived at the house. Nobody dragged Brooke away. Mr. Harris did not pound a gavel because attorneys do not carry gavels to dining rooms. It was quieter than that and much more effective. The next morning, a written notice from Mr. Harris's office went to every beneficiary. Estate access was restricted. Brooke's expected distribution was held pending accounting. The residence could not be entered without scheduling through his office and me. The bank produced records. Several of the round number withdrawals had gone toward payments on Brooke and Daniel's personal credit cards. One transfer had covered a past-due vehicle payment. Another had been moved into an account Brooke controlled, then partially returned after Mom questioned it. Brooke claimed the money had been loans our parents authorized. There were no loan documents. The questioned signature had been used on an authorization connected to a home equity application and broader account access. The application had not resulted in the full transaction Brooke appeared to expect, partly because Mr. Harris had contacted the institution after Mom mailed him her concerns. That certified mail receipt I had found under Mom's checkbook had mattered. The issue was referred through the proper channels for review. Mr. Harris never promised me a criminal case, and I did not ask for one. I wanted the estate protected and the truth documented. The court required a formal accounting, and any amount Brooke could not justify would be charged against her share or recovered by the estate. Her control disappeared immediately. Daniel hired his own attorney to review their joint finances. I heard through Julian that he moved out for a while after discovering debts Brooke had hidden from him. I did not call him for details. Their marriage was not my problem to manage. Brooke returned the house keys through Mr. Harris's office. 2 days later, Mr. Harris and I met at the storage unit with an inventory clerk. The roll-up door rattled open, and there were my boxes along the left wall. Mom's handwriting was still visible on the cardboard. Alyssa School. Alyssa photos. Grandma letters. The recipe cards were in a plastic grocery bag inside a box labeled Kitchen Misk. Mom's jewelry box was there too, though Brooke had claimed she had never seen it. Several framed photographs and small pieces of furniture from the house had also been stored without authorization. Everything was documented before anything moved. I took only the items clearly identified as mine and left the rest for formal inventory. That mattered to me. Brooke had built her entire defense around the idea that I wanted to grab whatever I could. I was not going to give her even one careless act to point at. Aunt Lorraine called a week later. She apologized for what she had said at the dinner and at the funeral. At first she tried to soften it with, "I was grieving too," but I stopped her. Grief explains why you were vulnerable to a lie. It does not explain why you were comfortable humiliating me. She was quiet. "You're right." I told her that if she wanted to repair anything, the apology had to be as public as the accusation. She had corrected me in front of cousins and in-laws. She could correct herself in front of them too. She did. It was not a grand speech. It was an email to the relatives who had attended the dinner and probate meeting. She said she had repeated false claims about my absence, that evidence showed I had provided extensive care and financial support, and that she regretted judging me without asking questions. Some relatives replied to me privately with apologies. I told them private apologies did not erase public behavior. A few sent better messages after that. A few avoided me completely. One cousin never apologized at all but began liking my posts online as though silent approval was the same as accountability. I removed her. Julian did more than apologize once. He gave Mr. Harris his complete records of the few times he had paid for medication or groceries. He admitted those contributions were small. He also wrote a statement explaining that Brooke had told him I was rarely present, and that he had repeated it without verifying anything. Later, he asked whether we could have coffee. I agreed, but I did not comfort him. He cried when he admitted he had avoided visiting Dad near the end because he could not handle seeing him weak. He had let Brooke's version protect him from feeling guilty. "I needed you to be the one who stayed away," he said, "because then I wasn't the worst one." It was an ugly truth, but at least it was true. I told him we could build a relationship slowly if he stopped treating peace as more important than honesty. He said he understood. I am still deciding whether he does. Brooke communicated only through attorneys for several weeks. Then she sent me a long message saying Mom had turned us against each other. Daniel had abandoned her when she needed him, and I had always resented being the younger sister. She never addressed the withdrawals. She never explained the signature. She never apologized for saying I abandoned our parents. I forwarded the message to Mr. Harris without responding. After the accounting, the estate recovered some of the money directly and offset additional unsupported withdrawals against Brooke's share. Her distribution remained restricted until the review was complete. She did not lose everything, and I did not receive some giant surprise fortune. That was never the point. The house stayed in the estate while debts, taxes, and expenses were settled. I coordinated repairs, insurance inspections, and supervised access. Every decision went through Mr. Harris in writing. No one could charm their way around the process. When the time came to distribute personal items, we used Mom's handwritten lists, the will, and a neutral inventory. Brooke had to return the remaining keepsakes she had removed. Items without clear instructions were divided through a documented process rather than whoever reached the house first. I kept Mom's recipe cards, the letters from my grandmother, the ceramic horse, and one photograph of all 5 of us taken before the family had learned to arrange itself around Brooke's moods. I also kept the voicemail. I do not play it often. It is not comforting. It is proof that Mom understood the damage too late and tried, in the limited way she could, to stop it from continuing after she was gone. I wish she had confronted Brooke while Dad was alive. I wish I had broken my promise and called Mr. Harris sooner. I wish loyalty in my family had not required receipts. But I no longer confuse silence with love. I set rules and sent them through Mr. Harris so nobody could pretend they misunderstood. All estate communication stayed in writing. Nobody entered the house or storage unit without authorization. Brooke had to cooperate with the accounting and return removed property. Relatives who insulted me publicly needed to apologize publicly if they expected a place in my life. Most importantly, I stopped paying for emergencies nobody mentioned until they needed me. 4 years my role had been to cover the bill, drive the late shift, fix the practical problem, and then stand quietly while someone else received credit. The moment I objected, I became difficult. I am still difficult now, according to Brooke. The difference is that the word no longer scares me. She can call me cold. Aunt Lorraine can call me unforgiving. Some cousins can say I took a family tragedy and made it legal. They can say whatever they want. The mortgage statements still have my account number. The hospice schedule still has my name. The funeral invoice still shows who paid. Mom's envelope still bears an unbroken line of blue ink across the place where it had been sealed. And Brooke's story no longer controls the room. I did not walk away with everything my parents owned. I did not get my old family back because the version I wanted may never have existed. What I got was smaller and more useful. The house protected, the money accounted for, my keepsakes returned, and my parents' final wishes placed on the record. That was the day I stopped begging my family to believe me and started letting evidence speak louder than grief. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.